appreciate it. And thanks everybody for the time this morning. Today we are going to talk about Review 360 for our special education populations. And I am part of the Review 360 implementation team. And Sherry, if my mouse starts going faster than the computer screen, please let me know. And like Sherry said, everyone, please type any questions in the chat box, and I will do my best to answer them along the way. So we know that there are many challenges facing our schools and our districts these days, and some of those challenges really have to do with all students, but especially special education students. And we know if students are not in the classroom learning, then there is that higher dropout rate. And we know that early onset behavior problems cause students to be 3 times more likely to fail. A lot of our special education teachers do come through alternative certification systems, and because of that, the turnover rate can be quite high because oftentimes these teachers don't really have the preparation they need to work with students who do have challenging behaviors. And so we really feel like part of the solution is Review 360. We were started about, 15 years ago now by 2 behavioral psychologists out of the University of Houston. And they really wanted to be able to work with students who do have behavioral IEPs to see if they are making progress or not. And that's how Review 360 was born. So we really take progress monitoring, incident management, professional development, and give you really good reports for each one of these features. And we do this in a comprehensive web-based solution that is really easy to use but quite robust. And we really do want to employ best practices and efficient and easy to use tools so that you can make data-driven decisions about students to really improve outcomes for the students, the classroom, and the schools. So as our founder, Dr. Stuart Pasecco, likes to say, we really do know what works for students with behavioral problems. The trick is, the challenge is doing what works consistently throughout a school or a district. With our behavior kids especially, they can move quite fluidly throughout a school or a district, and they need that consistency across the board. So Review 360 really blends data. We can really easily facilitate data collection and analysis. We have lots of different reports that are very easy to read and understand. Configurable dashboards, so you get the information that you need, and we'll look at that in just a minute. We have lots of professional development. We were started by educators for educators, and so we really want to be a coach along the way, and so we have on-demand professional development with step-by-step guides and templates. And then we also really provide excellent implementation support. We are, like I said, all former educators, and so we really want to partner with you to improve outcomes for all of our students. So what we want to do is we want to help teachers decrease time spent on paperwork. We want teachers to be able to teach so the kids can learn. We want to decrease suspensions and expulsions. So again, kids are in the classroom so that they can learn. And that's going to increase academic achievement. We want to be able to increase communication with parents and all stakeholders, everyone at the school and the district. And we want to make sure that we're using that data to make good decisions for our students. And we're going to look at some of this data here in just a minute. And you might be doing a lot of these things, but in a lot of different ways. You might be collecting data, you know, on a Google form. I was talking to someone the other day, and they're like, you know, my district, you know, collects incidents on a Google form, or you might be taking notes on a piece of paper. But by combining, you know, all of those data collection methods in one central location, we can make it a lot easier to review that data and again, help you with that decision-making process so we can improve those outcomes for all of our students. So I know this might be a little bit hard to see, but we'll go online here in just a minute. But this is an example of a dashboard, and this is an administrative dashboard. And the dashboard is really the central hub of Review360, so you can see what's going on. It is customizable, so you can put your own charts and graphs up there to see the information that's really important to you. You can see the kids that are have progress monitoring plans. You can see where people are in completion of any professional development that might be assigned or even optional. So let's talk about the different features that are involved in especially the Review360 special education solutions. So we know that usually the number one goal for our districts who use the special education solutions is progress monitoring, IEP goals. So we can progress monitor behavior goals, academic goals, goals for low incidence or lower functioning students, speech goals, and we also have some other different plans. And they do use different methodologies for data collection. We can also collect incident data. We can do in-class incidents, things that teachers can take care of and should be taking care of in the classroom. Positive behavior, we want to catch the kids doing good things as well as unwanted behaviors. We can document office referrals and student health incidents for our lower functioning students, and also CPI incidents or any type of restraint. And we actually can also produce that letter that needs to go home to any parent or guardian. Again, we talked a little bit about the professional development, but we have tons of different courses that are available. We have courses around behavior, autism, intellectual disabilities, strategies for working with students, behavioral students or lower functioning students. And with the first three, we also have a section in there about inclusion. So these are not just for our special education teachers, but they can be shared with the general education teachers who might be working with these students because of a least restrictive environment. All of the courses are online for anytime learning. They can be required or optional. And there is a certificate of completion at the end. And again, the administrator can monitor online who's reading what courses and where they are in that process. Some of the other features that are involved, we do have a functional behavior assessment, and I'm hopeful we can look at that. There is what's called a snapshot report, and that's going to compare the data from 1 month to the next to see if there are any trends or exactly what's going on at a school or a district. We also allow for token economy, and we do have on-demand software training built within the Review360 platform. We offer aggregate and individual reports for our progress monitoring, incident management, and again for professional development. So I'm going to share my screen, and this is the dashboard for a teacher. And I'm going to actually pull up the chat here so I can make sure I see if I see any questions. So this is a dashboard of a special education teacher. And I can see in my Spotlight widget, these are students who have progress monitoring plans. I have a training widget, so if I need to learn how to use the software, it's right here on demand. There's short videos. There's also handouts or documents that are going to show me how to use. There's a quick reference plan for about completing or creating plans, scoring plans, collecting data, and also how to look at the different reports. So there is quite a lot of on-demand services within Review360. I can also, as I report incidents, I can see the incidents. And the nice thing is if a consequence, if principals are involved, then I can see any consequence that's applied straight away. I don't have to kind of wait for paperwork to come back to me. And then I can also see which courses I have required, and I'm a little late on a couple of my courses, so I need to get to reading on those. But like I said, as first things first, typically what teachers want to do first is progress monitor IEP goals. And let's look first at one of the behavior plans. This is what's called a behavioral tracking plan. And the student is set up with a token economy as well. And before I actually collect some data, and this is what the page sort of looks like, we can see that we can collect data multiple times a day. There's a place for inclusion minutes. We have strategies that we're going to use to affect this positive outcome for the student. There's a little I next to the strategy, so it gives me a description, implementation steps, and then there's actually a video that I can watch if I need some information about how to use this strategy. So this is that on-demand professional development coaching that's built within Review360, and they're a couple of minutes each. And there's Stuart Pasecco quite a few years ago, and he narrates most all of these. And then in addition to tracking the goal of the positive behavior, we can also do a frequency count of the unwanted behavior. And so this is what a progress monitoring plan for behavior looks like. And when you're setting up the plans, I'm just going to go in here and edit. This is usually the longest part of the whole process because it does take a little bit of time to set up the progress monitoring plan. We have a start date. You can choose the number of periods or the frequency of the data collection. You can choose to use inclusion because I know one of the pain points is often keeping track of inclusion minutes for our special education populations and making sure that we are doing that efficiently. We have classroom rules that you can we can define system-wide, that we can see if the student is meeting the goals on those classroom rules. And then we can also set up how we want to collect data about the different objectives. We can share the plan with multiple teachers if we want to, or if there's an aide that also might be collecting data. But right now we just have one teacher who is actually collecting the data. Typically we have one or two objectives. These are going to be the student's IEP goals. We can add objectives, and we have a behavioral tree that we're going to look for the positive replacement behavior that we want the student to engage in. And tied to those behaviors are the strategies. And so tied to this objective, we have a laundry list of strategies. Positive reinforcement is already being used, but we can read through these and determine that maybe an activity to-do list will work for this student, for this objective. We can, the default goal is 80%. We can change that if we need to. And we can also individualize the objective, especially if you're writing standards-based IEPs. We can write it as a standards-based IEP as well. The classroom rules are listed, and again, we work with districts to standardize the classroom rules throughout the program, again, because we know students are often moving pretty fluidly. So if we have those consistent rules, we know that the students do better. The strategies that we've chosen are listed on the Strategies tab, and we can actually print out a strategy tip sheet that can be shared with general education teachers, parents, librarian, anyone the student is interacting with, so that they know exactly what we're using with the student to try to improve and to get that positive behavior. You also have the ability to put your own strategies into Review360, and once the strategy is in your bank, you can actually use that strategy with any of the students that you serve. And so we want to make sure that we are using good strategies with our students. And even if I put in this, unfortunately, it's not real pretty, but even with my the strategy that I put in the system, it will also show up on this strategy tip sheet as well. So again, everyone knows what we're doing, how we're working with the student, and everyone is on the same page. So then we can actually go in and score the plan. And once a plan is set up, then you can use a blank point sheet, and if it's appropriate, the student can take that from class to class. Teachers can fill it out. The student can bring it back at the end of the day, and then we can actually go in and enter the data pretty quickly. So we have now multiple strategies. We can indicate the effectiveness of them. You can do it across the strategy, down the period, or across all of them, and then kind of go back and individualize based on that blank point sheet. The classroom rules, this is set up on a yes-no scale. So either the student followed the classroom rules or they didn't, but usually people use a 0 to 2. And then the student objective. Again, we have the goal listed, and we can mark it. This is, again, set up as a yes-no. So the student did really well today. Because the student did really well, we probably did not have any of those unwanted behaviors, and we can save this. So you can see how the data collection can become quite quick once the plan is actually set up, especially if you're using that blank point sheet. Because maybe the student received all of their points today, then we might want to add to the student's token economy. It's a deposit, good day. And so if it's within your processes, then at some point the student can use their points in the token economy for activities, items, whatever it might be. And you can subtract, if the student uses anything. And then there is actually a list of the days that points were added, points were taken away, and so you can keep track of that. Once data is collected, we have a daily report, and that's going to show the data that was collected on the day. We can see the score for today. Both objectives were scored. Our total inclusion minutes, the strategy effectiveness, the classroom rules, the objectives, and then there's also a key. You can email this if that's within your processes to parents or guardians that might be in the system to really open up those lines of communication. Good day, and I can send that email to the parent or guardian if that's appropriate. The reports can also be printed out or exported as a PDF. Additionally, we have, I'm just going to check to see if we have any questions. No questions so far. Once data is collected, we do have up here charts, so we can look to see how the student is doing overall. So I can see by points percentage how the student is doing, and the student looks to be doing pretty good cumulatively. We didn't have any data collected one day. I can show this by period, so I can see if a student is having difficulties at one period as opposed to another. So I can start asking some questions. What's happening at period 4? Why is the student not doing very well at period 4? Is it right before lunch? The student's hungry? Is there another student in the classroom that my student might be having issues with? I can start asking some questions based on the data that I'm seeing in Review360. We can look at total points. We can look at the classroom rules to see how the student is doing on each one of the classroom rules. Again, we can show this by period, what's happening at period 4 and period 7. We can look at the objective, each objective, and then we can look at the strategy effectiveness. Are our strategies effective with the student? And it looks like positive reinforcement is, for the most part, pretty effective. If an objective is not effective, then we obviously need to change that and try something different. So that's a very, very quick overview of a behavioral plan. Also within the Review360 Special Education Solutions, we are able to work with and track IEP objectives for lower functioning students. So what this plan is going to look like, it's called a LIP plan. It's the red plan. And this is typically looking at daily living skills, lower functioning skills based on trial data collection methodology. And even the daily data collection looks quite different. We can look at the data collection in a weekly view. So this is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We can't put any data in for Friday because it's not Friday and we don't know what's happening yet. Or I can actually switch this over to more of just a daily view, and it looks a little bit more like the plan that we just collected some data on. To set up a plan, a low incidence progress plan for our lower functioning students, it works pretty much the same way. Oops. If I go in and edit this plan, you'll see I still have a series of tabs across here. I can share this with other teachers. I can put in the objectives. Obviously, the objectives for this plan are a little bit different. I can look at social interactions. We want the student to appropriately greet others. Perhaps that's the goal. I can add that to the plan. You'll also see that we can also put in milestones for these students because these are typically, daily living skills, and we know that maybe by the end of the year we want the student to be working pretty close to independently, but we know that they're not going to get there straight away. So we want to have milestones that they can reach before they reach that ultimate goal. So I can say by the end of 12 weeks, the student's going to be able to name things, using a pointing cue 50% of the time. And then at the end of 24 weeks, the student will be able to name things 65% of the time with a verbal direct cue, with the ultimate goal being by the end of the year, at the end of 36 weeks, the student will be able to name objects 80% of the time independently with no support from the teacher. And we'll see what that kind of looks like here in just a minute. And again, you can individualize these objectives and write them in a standards-based IEP format. So if I go to score this plan, I'll score today. Actually, I'll score yesterday. I can again put in my inclusion minutes. So let's say the student was included 30 minutes. My strategy is my verbal cue. Again, I've got that eye icon if I need to remember what that is. And I've got two objectives for the student. So ending conversations appropriately, but also we have that objective of naming objects. And so I want to collect data around that. So again, I have those milestones. So right now I'm in that 24-week time period, and my threshold is a verbal direct cue. So I'm going to do, most of the time we're using trial data collection with this type of goal. And verbal direct cue is my threshold, and I have a level of prompting key, with independent being independent, the highest level, and physical assist prompt being the least independent. But right now we're set up as verbal direct. So On the first trial, the student was not able to name the object. And you'll see again, the system's going to prompt you what your goal is. Second trial, the student was not able to meet the goal. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to use a visual cue, maybe touching or pointing. And the student was successful with that. And so we do that a couple of times. So then we go back to our verbal direct cue. What's the name of this? And the student was successful on the 5th try, the 6th try, and so forth and so on. Because this is our threshold, even though the student was successful, but because it's below the threshold, they're not going to get kind of total points for it. And that's reflected here at the bottom of the page. We can add additional trials on the fly, and we can always save this. So we can see that the student met the goal 7 out of 11 times. We can actually put a note here as well if we'd like to. We can also send notes home to the parent. I'm going to save this first. We can also send a note home to the parents, please, sign and return, or whatever else we need to tell the parents. And so that's going to show up on the daily report for the parents. And again, we can email this if it's appropriate, export it as a PDF, or print it. We do have Spanish as well, and so all of the headings are going to go to Spanish if that is needed. We also have a summary report, and so that's going to aggregate the data over whatever time periods you put into the system. So if you're looking at it every 3 weeks, every 6 weeks, what have you, we can do a summary report that lets us know how the student is doing overall. Again, we've got inclusion minutes listed here, the strategy effectiveness, how the student is doing on each one of their objectives. Because there are multiple goals listed, there are those milestones. It's going to list out how the student is doing with their prompts and cues. Additionally, and oh goodness, we looked a little bit at the charts tab with our previous plan. We also have a reports tab. That's going to give a laundry list of every day that data was collected, and I can go back and I can view the data collection for that day, the daily report for that day, and again, I can share it as needed. But we also have down here at the bottom of the reports tab a series of reports, and we're going to look at the improvement analysis report. And the improvement analysis report is going to show regression and recoupment after the student has been out of placement. So it can really help with extended school year services, or if you need to find out, do we need to intensify the supports for these students, after winter break, after spring break, what have you. And this is available for all of our different plans, not just the low incidence plan. So I can see this just kind of defaulted that right now we have a delta or a change of 20 that's black. That means the student is recouping that objective in a timely manner based on the dates that we put in here, and you can put in whatever your parameters are. So the student is doing well. I pulled up another improvement analysis for another student, and you can see that we've got multiple date ranges here. And for this student, we're showing that she is not recouping those skills in the timely manner. So we've got a negative or a delta that's red. So we know that we need to intensify these supports for the student when she comes back from a break. I don't see any questions yet, so. Okay, so that's kind of the second type of progress monitoring that we can do for our lower functioning students in our trial data collection methodology. We also mentioned that we can do academics. That's our gold plan. Let's see if I can sneak over here. So if a student is receiving special education services due to academic needs, then we can also set up an academic progress plan, the GOLD plan. Again, it's set up the same way. We can put strategies in there. We have our objectives. We have our reading language art objective. We have our math objective. Again, we can write those as standards-based IEP. For this student especially, because the student is probably going to general education classroom, we can do, again, that blank point sheet, and we can send it with the student, and the teachers can mark the response and then come back and someone can enter the data. So for math, let's say we're working on our math goal. This is just sort of set up as an X out of X, and we're working on maybe some homework, and it was 7 out of 10 times the student got the question correct. The goal is 75%, and we can save that. We use, because it's this math objective, we use manipulatives, and we can indicate how effective the manipulatives were with the student. Again, we have that daily report that we can send home to parents so that they know what's going on with their student. We have that summary report as well. We have the charts and things like that. I also mentioned that we have a speech plan. So for students who are receiving or speech-only students, or even they might have other IEP goals, but they also have speech goals, we have a speech plan. And it's set up very similar to the trial data collection. So with our objectives, we have our speech objectives, and so perhaps it's more of working with fluency with the student. These objectives are written as standards-based, and again, tied to the objective, we have the strategies, and you can pick X out of X or trials. You can change this if you need to do so. You can add the milestones. And then we can collect the data. So changing a plan and adding objectives, adding strategies are quite easy to do. That's a very quick nutshell, most of our progress monitoring plans. We have a lot of different progress monitoring plans, but those are the most frequently used progress monitoring plans. And again, this is the teacher login. If I jump over here to a principal login, the principal can see how these students are doing as well. So there's Mark. We just collected some data from Mark. I can actually go in and see how the student is doing. I can look at the reports. I can look at the charts, and I can look at that improvement analysis. We're going to look at the plan portfolio here in just a minute. So I can see at the school or the district level how the student is doing. Let me jump back over to the teacher. So let's talk a little bit about incidents. So we want to be able to collect data around students' behavioral incidents. And we have this is highly configurable, and we have a bunch of different incident types, and this one has quite a bit. We can do positive behavior. We want to catch the student doing good things, as well as that unwanted behavior. So I can type in the student's name, the date that the incident occurred, the time of day, the location. This is all kind of configurable. And what the behavior that the student engaged in. So perhaps it was helped another student. And I can put in the description, the student, and what the response was. Maybe it was recognition, and maybe we're going to contact the parent, and I can save that. There's always a confirmation screen, and depending on the type of incident, again, we have that same functionality. We can email the parent or guardian directly from Review360, Mark did great. Mark really helped. Another student. I can send that to Mark's mom. She knows what's going on. Let's see, there's a question. Are those behaviors configurable on the incident report? Yes, they are configurable. These are sort of defaults that we've used over time with people, but yes, those are configurable, definitely. But we know, unfortunately, sometimes, especially our behavior kids, but all kids, don't always act the way we want them to do. So we can actually report incidents for the unwanted behavior. We're always hopeful, especially with our special education students, that administrators are involved. And so we can set this up where office referrals go to the principal, and the principal goes in and assigns a consequence, but we know that that's not always the case. So we do also have it where the special ed teacher can kind of document what's going on, and I'm going to show you this way today. So kind of a disciplinary, unwanted behavior, things that are going to get the student sent down to the office. Again, you'll see kind of the same functionality, the date, the time, the location that this occurred at, maybe it's the cafeteria. If other staff are involved, you can document that. The name of the student, so I'm going to pick on poor Mark again. And then the behavior that the student engaged in. So maybe it was a technology violation or a harassment, whatever it might be. We'll just use technology. No, I don't want to do that. Fighting. And the description, the student. And then we can also, this was added, perceived motivation. Why was the student fighting? Maybe it was to avoid peers or what have you. And I can save that. You'll see we have this set up, again, for the teacher to assign the consequence, probably after it's really gone down to the office and come back. But before I do that, I want to show you a couple of things. So if you have any problems, and this is a confirmation screen. If you have any concerns about the 10-day rule, if a student is coded as receiving special education services or 504, in Review 360, we do have an alert on the incident. So that, again, we're hopeful that the principals are involved, but if they're not, we can at least document it. So when I assign a consequence, and right now you'll see that Mark has 0 days towards the 10-day rule. But if I assign a consequence, fighting was the behavior, and if that consequence takes the student out of placement, and again, that's configurable. So let's say it was an out-of-school suspension, and this district, the student does not receive services in out-of-school suspension, and it's assigned for tomorrow. And the schedule date is actually tomorrow. It's going to end. It's 1 day of out-of-school suspension, and the duration is 1 day. When I assign that consequence that takes the student out of placement, you'll see that now then Mark has 1 day toward the 10-day rule. So if you do have compliance issues with the 10-day rule, we can definitely help you manage that. I also mentioned, and I'm not probably going to go and complete one of these, but if you use CPI or any type of restraint, then we can help you with that data collection. And again, this is all configurable. And what will happen is once the incident is documented, and I think I just did one earlier today, so CPI, yep. If I do document CPI, then there is that restraint letter, that notification letter that does have to go home to parents or guardian, and this is what it looks like. This is just a generic one, but we can work with you to get this right for your school or district. So incidents. As a administrator, again, we're always hopeful that either the principal or definitely a district administrator are involved. When incidents are reported, we have just a laundry list of different reports that can be generated by, 4 incidents. So by grade, by gender, by ethnicity, by staff that are reporting, by student. We do usually know who the frequent flyers are, but we have reports that are going to show you as such. And once I'm going to do this for last year. Once the report is configured, and so this is an incidence by student, I can see, Jeff, Lori, Lenny, those are my students who are having the most behavioral incidents. I need to work with them a little bit more closely. I can actually save this to my dashboard. And so it's available anytime that I log into Review360. I can see my students that are having incidents reported. Again, we're always hopeful that the principal's involved, so they're going to see the incidents on their dashboard. So there's that incident that we just reported for Mark for fighting, and the administrator can go in and see what's going on with the student. They can see that 10-day rule alert. So we have a bunch of different incidents that can be reported. Oh, I'm running out of time. Back to Mark. We also have, and let me jump back over to the teacher login. If I go back to Mark, we also have what's called a plan portfolio. And what the plan portfolio is going to do, it's going to take all this data that you've collected for the student, progress monitoring, incident data, and it's going to aggregate it into one report. There are multiple parts to the report that you can include. If you need an IEP meeting agenda list, things like that, those are available. And these are great for the student's annual IEP meeting or any meeting with parents, the student if appropriate. And I can generate this report, but I actually have one already generated because it takes a while sometimes. So again, this is Mark's plan, the student information, any disability information, IEP meeting checklist, the agenda, any incidents that were created for the student, incident types, consequences, and then we start looking at the progress monitoring piece. So here's our summary report, how the student is doing on their strategies, their classroom rules, their objectives, the plan overview. Those are the charts and the graphs that we looked at. So our total points each day, an inclusion summary. So if you need help with documenting those inclusion minutes, we have the inclusion summary available on this report. Strategy effectiveness. Is the strategy or are the strategies we're using with the student working or not? If they're not, we need to change them. And how effective are those strategies? How the student is adhering to the different classroom rules that we've set in place system-wide. And how the student is doing toward their overall objectives. So we have a goal line set here. So the student is either very close or exceeding the objective most of the time. So we've got a 71 basically, and our goal is 80, so we're doing pretty good. And then we can look at the targets of the unwanted behaviors and the number of times these are occurring. So this plan portfolio is an excellent report where we're going to aggregate all that data, all the hard work that the teachers have put into place into one really very easy to use report. For our administrators, we also have a bunch of different analysis reports that are available too. And for our student plans, we have a student progress report, so I can see globally how the students are doing, and I can pick the different plans. So I'm going to do the behavioral tracking plan and maybe my low incidence plan and my academic plan, and I can view to see how those are doing. So I can see that we've got 14 plans. One of my students they're exceeding their goals or meeting the goals over 80% of the time. I can see how they're doing. I can actually drill into this number to see the student, the teacher, the number of sessions. This also kind of helps with implementation. Once a teacher has created a plan, are they collecting the data, and if they should be? So this will really help with implementation at the school or the district level to see how the students are doing as well as the teachers are doing. There's also a multiple student improvement analysis, so we can run those by individual students, or we can run those for all of our students. So again, if we're looking for extended school year services, we have those reports to document if it's needed or not. I have almost run out of time. Professional development. I'm kind of talking to y'all in the way that we typically implement the special education solution. So we typically set it up where teachers are entering the IEP goals and objectives first, because that's really the most important thing. We want to see how the students are, if they're making progress or not. Then we're going to document incidents to see if they're adhering to those classroom rules, or if we need to document student health, positive outcomes, whatever that might be. But then as we're overarching all of that, we have access to that professional development. And again, we can assign courses to teachers, or we can make courses available and they can register for them on their own. So the strategies for working with aggressive students. We give you the different components of the course so that the teacher can start wherever they want to. And as I mentioned before, with some of our courses, like the behavior course or say even the autism course, these are really great for general education teachers who might have these students in their classroom. And so we do have a section on inclusion. So it's going to talk about how to include these different populations in the general education setting. And we do have different templates that are available that can be downloaded and used straight away with the students. There are sort of very simple check for understanding questions at the end, and then like I mentioned, the certificate is generated when the course is completed. I don't have time to do this, but there is an FBA. I can just show you very, very quickly that, again, we've got the different tabs that are available, so you can interview. There's different data collection options, observations. The analysis, once you've collected all this data, then you can look to see how the student is doing as opposed to, say, their peer. And then at the very, very end, you can determine the conclusions of the FBA, and you can initiate a progress monitoring plan if you want to directly from the FBA if need be. We looked a little bit at the token economy. And then finally, if I jump back over here to the administrative tab, we also have the snapshot report that is going to allow you to see how you are doing compared 1 month to the next, and those can be emailed on a recurring basis. So I've had 2 more incidents in January from December. I can see who's reading the professional development, how my students are doing on plans, etc. So let me stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to kind of jump way down here. I had all these screenshots just in case my computer decided to die on me. So let's talk about very, very quickly some case studies. We worked with Brownsville ISD for many, many years, and you can see the different demographics about Brownsville ISD. But really most importantly is that over the years, Brownsville read our professional development, collected behavioral incidents, and over the years we saw a marked decrease in the number of in-school and out-of-school suspensions for both gen ed as well as special education students. So kids were in the classroom learning. They were doing better on their standardized and state testing. We also worked with a district who was having problems with exceeding the 10-day rule. And for all students, and we have it broken down into different demographics as well. And over time, over a 2-year period, we saw a marked reduction in students who are exceeding the 10-day rule, because we have that alert right there on the dashboard when someone is going in to apply that consequence, so we know that we're getting close to that. Compatible with PowerSchool, so we don't hand enter information from one program. We can interact with PowerSchool, yes. Academic outcomes. When students are meeting their goal over 80% of the time, they're doing better on standardized tests across the board. When the Review360 is implemented, the average implementation is 90 days, but if they're doing above average implementation, again, the students are doing better on those standardized tests. Review360 students compared to just general special education students, they are doing better on the state assessments. So we can see from one year to the next, the Review360 students started much lower, and then they exceeded their special education peers for both reading and math. And then again, when the implementation rate is really high, then again, the Review360 students who have above that are doing better in both categories. Staffing outcomes. We have worked with districts, when students are placed in non-public school placements, we worked with them to really set forth a program, collecting data, and we were able to help districts decrease the non-public school placements. Extended school year services, we talked about that, and we looked at the improvement analysis report. We do know that some students need ESY, but we want to make sure that we're serving the students that really need it, so that improvement analysis report can demonstrate that. And so, one district went from serving 243 students to serving 88 students. So those 88 students are really getting the support that they need. Again, self-contained. We know that students are supposed to be in the least restrictive environment. Again, by working with districts on their programs, we can make sure that students are served in the general education classroom as appropriate. We can help those general education teachers with the professional development, learning how to include those students in their classrooms. Time outcomes. We do survey our customers pretty regularly, and we do see that Review360 does save, we do save teachers time per month. So 42%, between 5 and 10 hours a month, and really, over half of our teachers who use Review360 do see a time savings. Let's see here. So are you compatible with PowerSchool so we don't have to enter information from one program to the next? Yes, we can interact with PowerSchool to send data back and forth between the two systems. There is some work that has to be done with the IT department and our development team, but yes, we do that. Wow, I really talked about that very, very quickly. Please send your questions in the chat. So let's talk about, I only have 5 minutes left. Let's talk about the different solutions that are available. So we pretty much have 2 special education solutions. For our special education populations, we offer progress monitoring, and we looked at those, strategies and interventions for the different progress monitoring plans, incident management, a bunch of different professional development, FBA reports, and like I said, there's a snapshot report. We looked at token economy, and this is based on a per student price. So the more students you purchase for, the lower the price is. We do offer implementation support, so someone like me, we do help you and work with you and partner with you to implement all of these different features over time. And then we do offer training. Typically with our special education customers, we do end-user training rather than train the trainer, just because we're talking about fewer people. And ideally, it's great when we can get in there, learn to create a progress monitoring plan, how to collect the data, and then really to have the time to actually create those progress monitoring plans in the live site is really, really powerful. So when teachers go back to the classroom, they can hit the ground running and they're ready to go. Our SLP is quite different from our special education package in that our SLP plan, speech language pathology plan, is sold on a per user basis with unlimited students. And we looked at that a little bit. So it is that progress monitoring plan using trial data collection or X out of X, and the strategies that are tied to the behavioral objectives. There are all of those reports that are available to the SLP. So there's the improvement analysis, the plan portfolio. Obviously, you're not collecting incidents, but that's available so you can see if the student is making progress, if the strategies being used are helpful or not. Let's see here. So we talked about the Power School. Any discount for case members? Unfortunately, not any discount right now for case members, no. How does the per student pricing work with regards to student mobility? When students move in and out, is data archived? Yes. So with Review360, and depending on how you manage students in Review360, you can manually enter them into the system, or we can work with different student information systems. We don't delete anything. We really archive things. So if a student leaves the school or the district and they are inactivated, but then they come back, you can very easily pull that data back up. And we just kind of look at the numbers at the end of the year. I hope that answers that question. If not, just let me know and I can try to answer it better. I covered a whole lot in a very short amount of time, so I'm hopeful that you got a little bit of a sense of the different progress monitoring capabilities within Review360, the different reports that are available so we can support those kids. Definitely, if you have further questions, you can go and check us out at pearsоnclinical.com/review360. And then there's our 1-800 number, 800-328-5999. We can definitely set up individual demos for you or answer any further questions that you have. If I haven't answered any questions, please type me in one last chat, and I will review those after we're done and make sure that we get you any of your questions answered that I may not have been able to do so today. I really appreciate the time. Thank you so much, and I hope everybody has a great rest of the day. Thanks so much.